Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series reading Dracula by Bram Stoker. Without further ado, returning to Dracula as read by Lord Naren White. He tried to turn his head, but even with the effort, his eyes seemed to glow glassy again. So I gently put it back. Then Van Helsing said in a quiet, grave tone, "Tell us your dream, Mr. Renfield." As he heard the voice, his face brightened through its mutilation, and he said, "That is, Dr. Van Helsing, how good it is of you to be here. Give me some water. My lips are dry, and I shall try to tell you. I dreamed." He stopped and seemed fainting. I called quietly to Quincy. "The brandy, it is in my study, quick!" He flew and returned with a glass, the decanter of brandy, and a carafe of water. We moistened the parched lips, and the patient quickly revived. It seemed, however, that his poor, injured brain had been working in the interval, for when he was quite conscious, he looked at me piercingly, with an agonized confusion which I shall never forget, and said, "I must not deceive myself. It was no dream, but all a grim reality." Then his eyes roved round the room. As they caught sight of the two figures sitting patiently on the edge of the bed, he went on, "If I were not sure already, I would know from them." For an instant his eyes closed, not with pain or sleep, but voluntarily, as though he were bringing all his faculties to bear. When he opened them, he said, hurriedly, and with more energy than he had yet displayed, "Quick, doctor, quick! I'm dying. I feel that I have but a few minutes, and then I must go back to death or worse. Wet my lips with brandy again. I have something that I must say before I die. Or before my poor crushed brain dies anyhow. Thank you! It was that night, after you left me, when I implored you to let me go away. I couldn't speak then, for I felt my tongue was tied. But I was as sane then, except in that way, as I am now. I was in an agony of despair for a long time after you left me. It seemed hours. Then there came a sudden peace to me. My brain seemed to become cool again, and I realized where I was. I heard the dogs bark behind our house, but not where he was." As he spoke, Van Helsing's eyes never blinked, but his hand came out and met mine and gripped it hard. He did not, however, betray himself. He nodded slightly and said, "Go on," in a low voice. Renfield proceeded. "He came up to the window in the midst, as I had seen him often before, but he was solid then, not a ghost, and his eyes were fierce like a man's when angry. He was laughing with his red mouth. The sharp white teeth glinted in the moonlight when he turned to look back over the belt of trees to where the dogs were barking. I wouldn't ask him to come in at first, though I knew he wanted to, just as he wanted all along. Then he began promising me things, not in words but by doing them." He was interrupted by word from the professor. How? By making them happen. Just as he used to send in the flies when the sun was shining, great, big, fat ones with steel and sapphire on their wings, and big moths in the night, with skull and crossbones on their backs. Van Helsing nodded to him, as he whispered to me unconsciously, "The Charontia atropos of the Sphinges, what you call the death's head moth." The patient went on without stopping.
Then he began to whisper, "Rats, rats, rats, hundreds, thousands, millions of them, and every one alive, and dogs to eat them, and cats too. All lives, all red blood, with years of life in it, and not merely buzzing flies." I laughed at him, for I wanted to see what he could do. Then the dogs howled away beyond the dark trees in his house. He beckoned me to the window. I got up and looked up. And he raised his hands and seemed to call without using my words. A dark mass spread over the grass, coming on like the shape of a flame of fire. And then he moved the mist to the right and left, and I could see that there were thousands of rats with their eyes blazing red, like his, only smaller. He held up his hand and said, and they all stopped, and I thought he seemed to be saying, "All these lives will I give you, and many more greater through countless ages, if you will fall down and worship me." And then a red cloud, like the color of blood, seemed to close over my eyes, and before I knew what I was doing, I found myself master, opening the sash and saying to him, "Come in, Lord and Master." The rats were all gone, but he slid into the room through the sash. Though it was only open an inch wide, just as the moon herself has often come in through the tiniest crack, and has stood before me in all her size and splendor.
His voice was weaker, so I moistened his lips with the brandy again, and he continued, but it seemed as though his memory had gone on working in the interval, for his story was further advanced. I was about to call him back to the point, but Van Helsing whispered to me,
"Let him go on. Do not interrupt him. He cannot go back, and maybe could not proceed at all, if once he lost the thread of his thought."
He proceeded.
"All day I waited to hear from him, but he did not send me anything, not even a blowfly. And when the moon got up, I was pretty angry with him. When he did slide in through the window, though it was shut, and he did not knock, I got mad with him. He sneered at me, and his white face looked out of the mist with his red eyes gleaming. And he went on as though he owned the whole place, and I was no one. He didn't even smell the same as though he went by me. I couldn't hold him home. I thought that, somehow, Mrs. Harker had come into the room."
The two men sitting on the bed stood up and came over, standing behind him so that he could not see them, but where they could hear better. They were both silent, but the professor started and quivered. His face, however, grew grimmer and sterner still. Renfield went on without noticing.
"When Mr. Harker came in to see me this afternoon, she wasn't the same. It was like tea after the teapot has been watered."
Here we all moved, but no one said a word.
He went on. "I didn't know that she was here till she spoke, and she didn't look the same. I don't care for the pale people. I like them with lots of blood in them, and hers all seemed to have run out. I didn't think of it at the time, but when she went away I began to think, and it made me mad to know that he had been taking the life out of her."
I could feel that the rest quivered as I did, but we remained otherwise still.
"So when he came tonight, I was ready for him. I saw the mist stealing in, and I grabbed it tight. I had heard that madmen have unnatural strength, and as I knew I was a madman, at times anyhow, I resolved to use my power. Aye, and he felt it too, for he had to come out of the night to struggle with me. I held tight, and I thought I was going to win, for I didn't mean him to take any more of her life till I saw his eyes. They burned into me, and my strength became like water. he slipped through it. And when I tried to cling to him, he raised me up and flung me down. There was a red cloud before me, and a noise like thunder, and the mist seemed to steal away under the door.
His voice was becoming fainter, and his breath more stertorous. Van Helsing stood up instinctively.
"We know the worst now," he said. "He is here, and we know his purpose. It may not be too late. Let us be armed the same as we were the other night, but lose no time. There is not an instant to spare."
There was no need to put out fear, nay, our conviction into words. To put our fear, nay, our conviction to words. We shared them in common. We'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.